Before we get started, let me just say that there are two ways to raise good kids. One is to follow the Bible's instructions and to trust God. Second way is to marry a good woman. And I did both. And so, and so I married a good, godly mother, and Kathy gets all the credit, really. The Lord and Kathy are why our kids turned out well. And so study your Bible, but also marry a good woman.
It's already been done.
Amen.
Go ahead.
Amen. That's awesome. So the first question is about teenagers and young adults. What room is there in the scripture for, and this is in quotes, picking your battles? In other words, for middle school, teens, young adult children living in one's home, is the biblical standard for obedience still relevant? How can parents navigate allowing their kids growing up to develop their autonomy and their walk with the Lord while keeping them accountable to your home's rules? It's a long one.
That's a good question. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Kathy's got a great answer for that. As she has had great answers for all my questions. Picking your battles. Boy, I wish you could pick your battles, but you really can't always pick your battles. Sometimes the battles come to you. You've got to step up and deal with it. But
Well, I guess the thing is what are you battling? Picky eaters, picky dresser. You know, if they don't like broccoli anymore, as a teenager, I would not force them to eat it. As a 8-year-old, I would make them eat it. Those kind of battles I would not pick, but standards of principles like boys should look like boys in their style, and girls should be modest in their style, so that that's a battle I always picked as far as dressing, not dresses. But as long as our kids were under our roof, they had the same standard, the same curfews. Especially the oldest one came back from college, and all of a sudden...
Came back from Bible college.
Yeah, all of a sudden he thought that because he was occupying a room, living in our home, that he had all his own new rules. And we made sure his life was really uncomfortable because it was time for him to move out. And so he had the same midnight curfew because nothing good happens after midnight. And so they had to be in our house by midnight. And he just didn't like those rules. And we were like, okay, then...
Get a job.
Well, he had a job. He was working for you, but...
It's true, didn't he? Was working for
you should have paid him more.
Nice.
But,
that wasn't going to happen.
But he got a roommate. But the thing is we had younger children, and we couldn't have two standards. The standards were the same all the way across and we battled. We had some really good battles at our house. Knocked out, drag out battles for righteousness.
But we won.
And
we won them.
No, God won them, dear.
God won them. That's what I'm telling him. That's what I'm telling you.
All right. Our next question here is, you had mentioned reason, rope,
I've already got
rod. What is a teenage equivalent of giving a reason, giving them rope, giving them the rod? How do I know how much rope to give a teenager?
Yeah, you can take that cell phone away. That's to me, that's a big motivation, that cell phone. Keys to that car, that's a huge motivation. Mm-hmm.
We had one kid that he was a roller hockey, and they loved their roller hockey
cool.
curls, and he had curls in his hair, and you already explained that.
Had long hair. The whole culture, they all had kind of long hair.
They had to have hair full out their hockey helmet. Anyway, he wasn't a very good student, and I figured if he really liked his hair, he would study longer and harder. So we told him, if he didn't make all A's or B's, I would cut his hair. Well, he tested me. He did not. Sandy says, "Are you really going to cut his hair?" And I had no better joy in my heart as I took that buzzer and I just cut that hair. It was like, I meant business.
Didn't you take the dog shears?
I didn't care
the
what
shears that you cut the dog with?
Yeah.
I think she did that with his.
But I took great joy in showing him my word. He can count on it, because it's the same principle. If God says no, or you need to do X, Y, and Z, I wanted him to be able to see that God has consequences to our disobedience or belligerence. And it wasn't that he wasn't capable, okay? He didn't have learning disabilities. He didn't. He just was lazy.
He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing.
It was defined. I'll see if my mama will cut my hair or not. It was so much fun.
I mean, she buzzed it. I mean, she just buzzed this. He looked like Zach. He looked like Zach. When she was done, before you started, he looked like Amanda, and afterwards he looked like Zach.
Living right along.
Okay.
But he knew he meant business. Mm-hmm. He knew he meant business. Mm-hmm. And you know, when you do these kinds of things with your kids, and you stay true to your word, I mean, it's intimidating. And you think, what's going to happen? Is this child going to never speak to me again? Is this child going to pack a bag and leave? I mean, what's this child going to do? And
he was 12. Okay, he was only 12.
Still you're worried. You know how's this child going to react? And but I don't know. Our kids understood that we cared. I think when this happened, our son understood that we cared about him. We loved him, and we loved him enough not to let him just do what he wanted to do. There were consequences to his actions, and we were willing to take on those consequences. Wasn't easy for us either.
The next question here is, it says, I feel lost and I don't know how to approach a solution to my daughter's change of attitude at home. Since she started working, I noticed the negative influence of her coworkers. Wow. She has a very stressful job, and now she wants to constantly travel with them. She knows the truth. She grew up in church, but she seems she's losing faith, impatient in waiting for the Lord's blessings in her life and seeking it in the world, including for a husband. Mm-hmm. My reaction at first is that when I found out that she even went on a date with an unbeliever was to panic. Please, I need advice. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, I'd like to know a little bit more about what age she is and whether she's starting now. She's working this job. It sounds like to me she might have graduated from college and now has a career job, and she's paying her bills and that kind of a situation. It'd be interesting to know whether it's that kind of a job or whether it's she's working at the burger joint or something. You know. Mm-hmm. If she's, if it's a part-time job, if she's still under my roof, if she's still on living off my paycheck, I'm going to take a much more aggressive approach in terms of, steering her and guiding her and letting her know what limitations are here. Mm-hmm. But if she's, say, graduated from college and, she's paying her own bills now and kind of living her own life, then I'm going to be a little bit more limited in terms of what I can say and how I can go about it. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
This is the power of a praying woman. This when it comes down to this mother's heart is obviously, to know the truth and to live out the truth is always the problem of maturity. And having faith that God has that child, that daughter, in his hands, and he's going to take care of it, just making sure. Prayer is the best solution to this one in that sense, and giving the good godly advice that only a mother can give. Sharing your heart. I'm sure that this mother's probably sought out the world in wrong ways in her past, and maybe she can share, or maybe you can have a friend share with her, or get her around some other people. I know you guys have a lot of resources here at this church, but I think probably this is where it comes to prayer. And
It sounds like to me this mom and daughter have a good friendship together. And so I would certainly press into that friendship and sit down with my daughter and try to talk to her about some of these issues. But maybe not so much from a parent's perspective, but as hey, we're friends. I love you, and this is what I see happening, and can we talk about this? Take her out to dinner one night, or maybe go on a trip or something together, where the two can discuss these kinds. It sounds like they have a good relationship, and they can discuss some of these things. A lot depends on as they get older and as they begin to move away from mom and dad. Your attitude changes and your relationship changes, and I think you no longer have the same leverage to deal with some of these issues as you once did. And the child's on their own; they're going to make their own decisions, live their own life, and you take more of a supportive role at that point than you do necessarily a authoritative role.
Yeah. Those transitions are difficult.
You were great at this, Kath. You were great at this.
Were?
Well, you still are. Yeah, you still are.
I'm already.
Kath is great at. Kath was great with babies. She was really great with babies, and she's really great with adult kids. I'm great with everything in between, but I'm just kidding. No. She's great with everything in between, but she was really great with the babies, and she was really great with the adult kids. And you were able to just transition from authoritative role to friend, colleague role in our kids' lives.
Well, that's because you never took off the I'm in charge hat.
Well, I know. That's my problem, and I just never could.
That's the problem of adult children. They don't want you to be in charge anymore.
Yeah. I saw all the mistakes they were making, and I just kind of wanted to fix things. And you can't have that attitude as they get older and as they get out on their own. You got to become more their friend, more their colleague, than remain, an authority in their life. So it changes.
Yeah. Speaking of changes, should I encourage my middle school, high school children to date? Should I allow them to? What's an age to let them date?
Well, like Kathy said, you don't ever encourage them to date. You don't encourage them to date. You may allow it with certain guidelines and certain, with certain parameters, but you wouldn't encourage it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never middle school. I don't think they're mature enough. I know it's been a while since I had a middle schooler in my home, but I have middle school grandchildren now, and I cannot imagine.
No.
But they think they're old. They think they're mature enough. A lot of our approach to parenting was the greenhouse effect. And I thought it was my responsibility to keep my kids in a greenhouse and make sure that their roots were planted deep, deep into the soil, so that when the greenhouse effect was removed slowly, that they had strong enough roots that they wouldn't be dried out or tossed to and fro or uprooted. And that was different for each child. Some stayed longer in that greenhouse because of their own maturity, or immaturity, should I say. And then some wanted a bigger fishbowl to swim in, and so they were given a little bit more freedom. And that's the hardest part about parenting is, like Sandy was saying, it's not cookie cutter, and you've got to know. So for your child, it might be appropriate, and for the next family, it's inappropriate for a 15, 16-year-old. And that's why we've never put age standards, just because it's really your situation. God's going to give you the wisdom to know what to do, but you just got to really, really understand that most of the times it's what's the motive behind wanting to go off by themselves. on a date.
That's where we were limited them.
Yeah, very much limited.
Going off by themselves. And if they wanted to have friends over to the house, we dealt with that. If they wanted to, go on a date and the guy wanted to come over and meet me first, and we had all kinds of rules that applied to it that we put in place, and we had a strict curfew. So it wasn't, we're talking when Natalie was dating, it was like 10 o'clock. It was like she barely had time to get an ice cream and get home,
I'm surprised my daughter's not scarred. But.
Here's the rule that I always went by. Time plus opportunity equals trouble. In dating, time plus opportunity equals trouble. When there's time and when there's opportunity, there's trouble. Now, when there's time and there's no opportunity, it's fine. You can bring your boyfriend over here to the house and let him sit on the couch with me. We'll watch a football game all day long. No big deal. There's time, but there's no opportunity. Okay, if there's opportunity, but there's no time, that's a good thing too. But what you don't want is time plus opportunity. I don't care. I don't put myself in positions with other women where there's time and opportunity. When there's time and opportunity, there's trouble. So you just never want to put those two things together. And when your kids are dating, that's a good principle to follow. We don't want to put them in a situation where there's time plus opportunity. Let there be time but no opportunity, or opportunity, no time, but not the two.
I think that's wonderful, the application of the standards that I have for myself, also for my
Sure.
kids. That's awesome. You said about not setting ages on it, so I'm going to kind of rephrase the next question, which is, when is a good time how can I tell that my teen is ready for a phone? Should I monitor it? Is that an invasion of privacy?
Absolutely not. Invasion of privacy. They have no privacy. Your kids have no privacy.
Amen.
They're living in my house, under my roof, eating my food. You got no privacy.
Amen. I like that. Quick and short.
Maybe in the shower. Maybe in the shower, but
sometimes I've seen this, so I'm asking the question. But I've seen sometimes. We're so blessed that our youth, they love youth events, they love youth camp, and it seems sometimes struggling to find what's the right rope to give a teenager when they're when they're needing rope. Sometimes a parent will think, well, what if I just prevent them from going to this youth event or youth camp?
Terrible. That's a terrible idea.
Terrible idea.
The question is, should I discipline my teenage son by not allowing him to go to a youth event or camp? You want him to go to church. You want him to be involved in church stuff.
Labor, hardcore labor is what teenage boys need.
Yeah. Make them work.
Work them.
Punish them by working them.
Make them run up and down the street when they had too much. They'd be 10 years old. I'd make them run up and down the street.
I'd make them do push-ups.
They had too much energy, so.
Yeah, but you don't want to deprive them. You don't want to punish them by depriving them what's going to be good for them. You want them to come to church. You want them to want to come to youth group. You want them to be involved in the church activities.
The next time they'll
don't want to punish them by taking that away.
Well, they might act out so they don't have to go next time.
Yeah, that's true.
You never know.
But, you can find other ways of disciplining your kids other than taking away the things that are good for them.
Next question says, my son loves sports. He's active in a great team, but lately the games coincide with church or youth group. Is it wrong to keep him in the team?
Well, we faced this quite a bit because we had ended up with 2 collegiate athletes in our house. So we've been through the gamut of high-level sports and the high-level obligation that requires. And our coaches always knew the standard. Sometimes we would be out of town, and if we were out of town, I was the one that would do the transporting. Sunday mornings, we always found a church to go to, and they always knew. They have 8 o'clock service churches everywhere now. Our coach knew that we would be there after church, And you know what? It was very respected. And if your coach is not going to respect that, then you might want to find a new team. But like I said, we had a lot of different sports and coaches and never found it a problem. And my kids never gave me a hard time about going to church, and they're all still actively involved in church. And I think it was because that standard, even ball plus God, works. It's not just ball, it's God plus. And I know it's a difficult thing, though, because we have grandkids that are now in the same situation. And I'm playing that role in their life again. We'll go to church in the morning, and I take them to ball because their parents are at church, and he's at church. So, which has been wonderful. I know one of these questions talking about how do you communicate with your teenage
Let me just
sons.
say one other thing. I know my assistant pastor, his daughter played high-level softball, and she missed like church on Sunday mornings a good bit, but she would always be there on Sunday night. She would always be there at some church service during the day. Or if she missed the early church, so she'd be there. We had 2 services on Sunday morning, so they'd always be there for one of the church services. So, if there's a will, there's a way. And we just tried to make it a real point to where we were just going to try to make this thing work. And if it ever came down to, hey, we're going to make a decision to follow God or play ball, we're going to follow God. I mean, it's just, there's no question. But and my kids understood that, but it was something we loved them, and we wanted to do what was best for them, not just because I'm the pastor at the church, or not just because we wanted to let them know that we cared about their concerns as well. So we tried to balance it all out.
So this next question that Kathy was referring to is, how does a mom communicate, have meaningful conversations with her teenage sons who tend to only have one-word answers?
Well, that's a great question.
Well, for some reason, we're an athletic family, and so ball became a big part of life, and Sandy was always the coach. So they do the baseball, and Sandy was the coach, and I would just be on the sideline, and I wasn't having a lot of interaction with my boys. And so I decided with the last 2, I had really missed out on some relationship with Zach, my older one, because I didn't have that connection. And so I was a tennis player, and so I picked up tennis again and taught my boys how to play tennis. And the main thing was so that I would go and do something with them that they enjoyed doing. And that's what opened them up. On our way to the courts or on the way home or on the court, we would just talk about this, that, and the other, and they would relax. But they're always going to give you these one-word answers. That's the wiring. And so you've got to get them, whatever, if it's art, then you enjoy art with them, but you've got to meet them where they're at, where they're comfortable, and then you just be surprised that after a while they won't shut up, because they're in their territory, they're not under interrogation. And I think sometimes kids, especially boys, feel like mom, but I don't know, I love boys. I'm a boy mom. We did more fort making. I would take them to Home Depot and buy wood and that kind of thing, far more. But the conversation didn't come from just sitting down, let's have a chit chat. The conversation came from interaction. And so, yeah, it takes a lot more work than girls who just want to sit and chit chat. But it's a lot more fun to be a mom of boys like that. So. Since you're not a mom, you can't answer that one.
No, I can't. But that's really true. I mean, you did a great job with that.
Boy, I like this. Say that again.
You did a great job with that. You did a great job with that. You did a great job with that.
How do you repair the relationship with your children after making many mistakes as a parent?
You just say you're sorry. You say you're sorry. You apologize. You humble yourself. You swallow your pride, and you just you confess when you blow it. I mean, you just got to confess. You got to be real. You got to be honest. And you're fooling yourself if you don't think you make mistakes. I mean, we lose our temper, get upset, we go too far. I'm still saying I'm sorry. There's times now when overstep my bounds, and I'm a granddad, and I step into a situation and I see them raising their kids differently than the way I raised my kids, and I say, "What are you doing?" And I have to stop myself and catch myself and say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, guys. You're doing a good job, et cetera, et cetera." But I mean, we make mistakes. We just got to confess them, and we got to be honest and ask for forgiveness. And our kids love us, and they'll forgive us.
That's awesome. Now, are prodigal kids a sign of parenting failure?
Oh, no. Well, how can you say that? Adam and Eve rebelled against God. It wasn't because he made a mistake. I mean, God was the ultimate father. I mean, he didn't make a mistake, and yet Adam and Eve still rebelled. I don't think if you have a prodigal kid, I mean, you may have made mistakes. I'm sure you made mistakes. We all make mistakes. But it's not, you can't lay that blame on the person. Kids have a free will. They make their own decisions. And as I said earlier in the seminar, there are no guarantees when it comes to raising kids.
Well, the thing is you might have had failings, but you're not a failure.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference. And I think Satan uses this to condemn. And it's probably one of the hardest part of adult children that you've watched having prodigals, because you want so much for your kids, and it hurts so much that they're not living to that potential. And so Satan just wants to steal your joy. But God still has that child wrapped up in his arms of love, and is going to work things together and keep on loving that child and accepting the child's growth.
A few questions on smaller children. What's an appropriate age to start spanking?
A little tap on the hand, tap. If they're going to go touch something is appropriate, because that's the only way. Sometimes a little small child doesn't understand. They might understand no, but the little consequences, because you'd rather have them feel a little sting on the hand than get burnt by electrical outlet. It has to be appropriate for the spanking.
But when they look up at you,
Tell you to mind your own business.
when they look up at you and they look at you like you're not going to tell me what to do. I mean, you can say, when that's defiance.
Apply the Board of Education to the seat of learning.
I mean, to me, there comes a time when your child is defying your authority.
And this is few and far between now.
Yeah, well,
few and far.
Yeah,
you reserve
probably.
Reserve for the times where it is.
But when your child is defying your authority, you have to win that battle. You can't let that slide. You can't allow them to do that. Now, you don't necessarily have to spank them. There can be other forms of discipline that you can use. But you have to put down the revolt. If your child begins to learn that they can rebel against you and things will go well, they can get away with it, and they can manipulate you, or if they defy you and you back down and they get their way, they've won. And you've lost, any ability you have to lead your family. So I just think when your child defies your authority, and you'll know it when it happens, you'll sense it, there's no mistaking it, that's when you need to discipline your child.
The question is, we have to spank our toddler every day. Is that too much? That's what the question says.
Depending on the toddler.
My third one, yeah.
We spanked him every day.
Well,
Just about.
I had my first two kids, they were 16 months apart. They were Zach and Natalie, and we called them our precious moments children. You know, little angelic cherub children. And then Nick came. And he was born at 10 pounds. And he didn't understand cause and effect too well. And he was very big and very strong, and he didn't understand stuff like if you golf in a glass-filled garage, that you might break a window. He just had
He
all
broke stuff.
but it wasn't defiance.
But yeah, it wasn't defiant. And that's not what you punish. That's not what you discipline a child for. You don't discipline a child for being a child.
But he's the same one that looked him square in the eyes.
Yeah.
So he would go from back and forth. But I would say if you have, personally, this is just personal, and you'll know it as a mom, you'll sense it right away. If the spanking has to be done over and over and over, apparently it's not getting the message across. And so it's not the right tool of discipline for the action. And you'll know it because it's not working. And so maybe there's a more effective way, taking the toy away, putting him in time out, no TV, no screen time. Whatever it is, the point of discipline is to change behavior. And if it's not changing behavior, then it's up to you as the parent to come up with a better, ask God for wisdom, because every kid's different, to motivate the change of behavior. Because that's the whole thing. They got to choose.
It's education through discipline. That's what
They're
that's what we're
choosing
looking
with the
for.
right behavior and choosing that they don't want the consequences. And these parents I hear, do you want a spanking? Well, no, you don't ever ask a child that. You tell them the consequences of this behavior is going to be discipline. I always make sure they understand behavior has consequences. It is a principle in life. No matter what if you're speeding down the highway and there's a cop sitting there, the consequences are a blue light. And you ask for it as you blew right past them. Well, you choose. How many of you see a cop and what do? You put on the brakes. Well, that's what you're trying to teach your children too, when to put on the brakes. If I keep doing this, I'm going to get disciplined, so I better choose to put on the brakes. Stop this behavior. Stop this attitude.
And if you never discipline them,
They'll never know
they'll
it.
never learn to put on the brakes.
After so many tickets, you learn, you better slow down, right? Oh, come on, you guys act like you never got a speeding ticket.
My child cries very loudly when I say no, and they can't hear me if I speak in a calm voice. This happens at school too, and they disrupt class. How can I help them?
My child often cries very loudly.
We allowed our kids to their room was their safe space. And of course, this is how we did it. It might not work in your house, but I figured they needed some place to express themselves, even if it was ugliness. And so if they wanted to cry and scream and holler and be ugly, sure, go to your room, close your door, cry and complain all you want in there. Well, they don't want to do that. But you'd send them there, and after a while, it was no fun, so they just shut up. And they'd come out, and come out when you're going to be quiet again. So I think kids have a need to express their frustration because they don't know how to do it yet. They're still learning. I mean, we get frustrated, and we don't know how to do it. How do we expect a 2-year-old to understand how to control emotions? Well, apparently yelling loudly has gotten the desired effect.
Right. This child
From that
knows.
child.
Knows how to push the buttons.
Exactly how to do it. And so now in school they're going to handle it different than you are at home, and they should have that freedom. Hopefully they're at a good school that you've given them that liberty to. But at home, if they want to cry out loud, go to your room and do it. See if that doesn't work for a while. Even when you can talk in a calm voice to, Sandy can talk to me in a calm voice, but if I'm in that mood, it don't work either. So. He sends me to my room too, and I'm happy. There were times when he'd come home from work and I'd have 4 kids and they were all crazy, you know. And we would have a thing we called my parent card. You know, moms, you know, that parent card. And there's times he'd walk in the door and I'd say, here's my parent card. I'm tapping out.
gone.
And I'd give him my parent card and go to my room. And it was just like, I knew I was at that point. And I'd turn over my parent card. I just turned it in. So, I don't know. These are good questions to ask each other, you know, other kids that have, you know, same age group. You know, how do you do this? Because it can be very, especially the next question talks about in public meltdowns.
I'll read it through. It says, how would you break down what to do in private or in public when your toddler has an absolute meltdown, crying, screaming, kicking on the floor because of something little, like opening the straw for their apple juice when they wanted to do it themselves? Would it be different if it was something more defiant, like you took away a toy they hit their sister with? You know, how do you handle
So these are
meltdowns?
2 different meltdowns I walked away from, or I told them to go to their room. I see this happening all the time with the juice thing, you know, and they want it, me do. They're in the age of me do. And I ignored it. I said, here's the juice. I opened it. It was my choice to open it. This is manipulation again. I wanted to do it, and you didn't let me do it. And then we try to calm and, no, I am the mother. I opened, I chose to, here's the apple juice. If you want it, you drink it. If not, I'm going and doing something else. I'm a no-nonsense mom, as you could probably tell already. But with 3 boys, I had to be really on top of things.
If we had a kid try something like that in a restaurant or whatever, we would pick them up, take them back out to the car, and we would deal with it in the car. And if they needed a spanking, give them a spanking and bring them back in.
In the car.
In the car, rather than in the restaurant. And then we bring them back in and make them sit down and behave themselves.
Awesome. I feel like I can't discipline my child. When I do it, it just seems to backfire. They hate me more. There is more rebellion. How can I fix this?
Well, for one thing, make sure you got the rod and the apple. Make sure both are there. Make sure the apple's there. Make sure your child knows that you love him, that you're not angry with him, that you care about him, that you love him, that you want to do good things and put good things in his life. Both are needed. And we don't want to emphasize one over the other because both are needed in a child's life. That would be the first thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And do not grow weary in well-doing. There seems like seasons of our children where it's just one thing after another. And you can get really, really tired, especially if you're working outside the home full time. You come home and you're just tired. And you have to realize it's not their fault you're tired. And you've got sometimes just to pull from God's strength to be that mom and realize this too shall pass. It's just a season. They're just testing you. And there's sometimes that you just have to tell the kids, you know, we're just all so tired. Can we just have a ceasefire for a while? You know, let's just chill out. Or if they're constantly needing discipline in that sense, you know, maybe it's time for some fun as a family. Go shoot some hoops or do something fun, something that resets the family joy again. Because you can have those seasons of conflict. Someone shake your head. It's not, you know, some of you moms understand this. It just sounds like you just like, you know, reset. Let's just have a reset, you know.
I tell you, it's tough. When at one time, we have 4 teenagers. I mean, that's tough. It's tough living in that environment. And there were days when I would feel like, man, I'm doing everything I can for this family. Nobody appreciates it. And it just it can get discouraging. But let me just say, those kids know you love them, and they care about, and they know you care about them, and just hang in there. It'll pay off at some point down the road. It'll pay off. When I turned 60, we had a big birthday party, and all my kids came and told me how much they loved me and how much they appreciated all that I'd done for them. And I'll take those things. I felt like this is my reward. I mean, this is my reward for those years. But it's hard. It's tough. I mean, you gotta stick with it. But that's what you signed up for. Mm-hmm. If you didn't want to do it, you shouldn't have done what you did. but you did it, and you signed up for it, and so it is what it is, and so you've got to stick with it.
No question was asked, but I think it's a principle. Talking about the apple, making sure, the older my kids got, there were certain things I would make sure that they understood that I had faith that they would make the right choices. That I believed that God had entrusted them with the ability to make the right choices. That I believed in them. It wasn't, now make the right choices, It was like, I can't wait to hear how you made the right choices. I want to see the fruit of making the right choices, and instill in them the confidence that you have in them. Do they know that you're confident in them as a child of God and the empowering of the Spirit within them? They need to know so much more about that aspect. Not that they're good athletes or whatever, that's good. But my kids I kind of like to pump them up that God had such a grand plan for their lives, that he was going to equip them, and that he's given them a church to belong to that will equip them, that he's given them parents and friends to equip them, and that they had their whole life in front of them. So today's going to make the best day. Trust God. So don't cheat on your test. Don't, you know what I mean? Make the best. And I think that really helped our kids along the way, because they knew that we believed in them. We believed that God had something good for them. And so they started to believe it too. Because they're getting torn down in this world that they don't even know if they're a boy or a girl, for crying out loud. That decision God made for them. The end. Right? Mm-hmm. Right? That's one decision that we need. Besides coming to faith, that's the one decision God did not give mankind, and that's now the one decision that mankind thinks we're taking back. Mm-hmm. God already decided your identity.
The earlier question was for the teenager. How do you discipline the teenager? And the illustration that just hit me was when Mac had his accident. We had our youngest. I went out. He had gone through a great stretch, and I wanted to reward him. I wanted to bless him. I went out and bought him a new truck.
A new used truck.
It was a new used truck.
Our kids all drove jalopies.
Yeah.
Because they're going to wreck them anyway.
So I went out and bought him a truck, and he had this truck for a little while, and then he was on his cell phone, ran a red light, and totaled it out. Well, let me go back. Before he was driving the truck, he was driving a Grand Marquis. You know what a Grand Marquis looks like?
They're ghetto cars in our area.
It's not a 16-year-old. It's not a 16-year-old's dream car. It's not a 16-year-old's dream car. Somebody had given it to me. Somebody at the church had given it to me.
People give them their old cars because it's too hard.
And so I had him in this Grand Marquis. It was horrible. It had rusted out. It was rusted out and all the rest. And so that was the deal. I said, okay, son, I'm gonna get you a better car. I'm gonna get you a truck. So I bought him this truck. So he's driving his truck, drives through a red light, crashes the truck. And so I put him back in the Grand Marquis. And then I got the reimbursement from the truck and bought me a new truck. I bought me a new truck with the insurance money and put him back in the Grand Marquis. And I said, you were on the cell phone. You messed up. This is the consequences of what you're doing. You're going to drive this Grand Marquis. for another. He drove for 2 more years, drove it into college. But you talk to him about that today, and he'll go back and he'll tell you that was one of the most formative things that he went through, because he realized he'd made a mistake, and he realized the consequences of it. And today he's the only one in the family, drives the nicest car in the family, doesn't he?
That he's paying for himself.
That he's paying for himself.
That's success. I think the next 2 questions were answered in one way or another. I'd like to, before we run out of time, maybe look at some of these other topics. How do you come to an agreement with your spouse about your children's upbringing? What if your spouse is an unbeliever?
Well, that's hard. I mean, that's hard. And there's compromises that you'll have to make. I would just, if my spouse was an unbeliever, I would want to make sure that when we talked about these issues, that I came to the table with the things that were really important to me, the things that I felt like were things that would make a difference in my child's salvation. I would want to make sure that those got factored into the equation. And then there's other things that my unbelieving spouse I would have to work on. I mean, it's you're unequally yoked, and this is a frustration. This is a challenge, and that's why the Bible tells us that the person who's unequally yoked, that believers shouldn't be unequally yoked to an unbeliever, but sometimes that's unavoidable.
But even yoked together in the Lord, I think raising kids brings out marital issues.
That's true.
And is most challenging on marriages, because my role as a mother is the cheerleader and protector, the nurturer. From that perspective, and Sandy's role is much different, and there's many times that we conflicted over it. I had a different way of disciplining that particular situation, and he had a different idea too. And needless to say, there was times that we disagreed on that. And unfortunately, we didn't always disagree in private or appropriately, I think.
There's no privacy.
No privacy, not at the Adams house, even in the shower. But that's where a lot of seeking the Lord together as a family and realizing the potential it can have on your marriage. That's why you see a lot of couples, once their kids get out of high school or in high school, they break up. And it's because of the kids and the conflicts. And no one wanted to give in, and the wife didn't want to respect how the husband wanted to do it, and vice versa. And it's, I think that was the hardest period of married life for us, looking back.
It was.
But that's where...
it's always good to remember, I'm going to live with her longer than I'm going to live with those kids. That's my plan.
And he's still living.
That's my plan. My plan is to live with her longer than I was going to live with those kids. So we need to work it out.
The thing is I was raising husbands. I know people always said, well, you raising your boys? I said, no, I want to raise boys that when their wives will rise up and call me blessed, because I equipped them to be good husbands.
And you did.
And his goal was to make sure that
they were men.
They were men in the workforce to be good providers and good men and good leaders. And so our roles and our approaches were very different to parenting with the same principle. But you know what I'm saying? You understand? Thank you. Someone nodded at me. So, and I did raise some really good husbands. They knew how to cook and clean, and my daughter-in-laws, they love me now.
And they all work hard and
yeah, they love
make
you
good
too.
living, yeah.
So, that's wonderful. How do you handle grandparents that spoil your kids?
You just get out of their way, let them do it. now that I'm a grandparent. But I'll never forget
That
my
was
dad.
confidence.
That was really not true. That's really not true. Because Kathy would get so upset. We'd bring them over to my dad's house, and my dad would feed them chocolate. I mean, he'd just feed them chocolate like it was going out of style. Like a chocolate dump, on those
They
kids.
would let them eat the biscuits before they ate their vegetables.
He had
That's
those little
just
Andy
not what
candies.
do.
You know the little Andy candies? He'd have his refrigerator was stacked full of those things. And the kids would come over and they'd go in the refrigerator and he just let them eat those little chocolate candies. Kathy got upset about it. And I had to go over and confront him about it. I said, Dad, Kathy does not like these kids coming home all hyped up on chocolate. And you got to stop it. He says, I'm not stopping anything. They're my grandkids. He said, I'll sue you. No kidding, he threatened to sue me. I said, you can't sue me.
Grandparent rights.
You're a grandparent. I'll sue you. And I'll never forget that night. I was in his driveway, and I'm sitting there trying to tell him, you can't hype my kids up on Andy's candies and send them home like this. And but it was either confront my dad or deal with Kathy, and I wanted
he's
to
still
confront
living with me.
I figured I was gonna live with Kathy longer than I was gonna live with my dad. So I went to the bat, and just confronted him
He
on it.
struck out, but oh well.
And he changed. I mean, he changed over time, sorta changed.
The next question came in.
Now though, I'm the granddad. And so here's what they do. The moment those kids hit the house, the moment they walk through the front door, they come running. Gee, Daddy, that's what they call me, Gee, Daddy. Gee, Daddy, Angel's food cake. And at Kroger, they make these angel food cakes. They're in the little tub. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're in a little tub. You pop the top, and so, Gee, Daddy, angel food cake. And so I always have one sitting next to the sink, and I'll pop the top on the angel food cake, and they come in, and they just grab with their hand. They just grab a chunk of angel food cake out and run off, and I just laugh.
Apes.
I laugh. and their parents just shake their head, And I said, that's what grandparents do. Anyway, next question.
This question came in during the seminar. It says, how do we parent this way? The rod. Well, this is now a test for me. The rope, the rod, and the reason, rope and rod, and PTA. If we come from unbelieving parents and they did all the contrary with us.
Yeah, I think you decide how you want to raise your kids. You decide how you want to raise your kids, and you realize that you realize the purpose of a parent, and you work it out. You work out your salvation with fear and trembling, and you work it out. I think if you don't remember anything else I said, the purpose of a parent is to teach your children obedience and respect. And that is unheard of in our society today. But that is the purpose of a parent. And we're producing a whole culture today of people who lack any obedience or respect for anything. And the quality of our lives are deteriorating as a result. We need parents that will raise good kids, and kids that know how to respect other people and know how to obey the parameters that are on their life. We all have parameters that we have to live within. And we need to redevelop a society of people who believe in these things. I mean, the job, and it all goes back to the home. It all goes back to the family. This is our job as parents, to teach our kids obedience and respect. And how you go about doing that, we've talked about today, but understand you can't escape that calling. You need to do that. And whether your parents were concerned about that or not, it's beside the point. what does God say about your parenting? That's what you need to follow through on.
Do you guys have any, what is a step-parent's role? And then the next question is kind of like it. Any advice for adoptive parents?
Well, adoptive parents they should be applauded. They should be, we thank the Lord for all the adopted parents, and children need to know that if they're an adoptive child, they are special. They are loved. They should always know that they were wanted. An adopted child should always know that they're wanted and they're loved and they're appreciated. And the fact that a parent has taken the time to adopt a child and actually make a child his own, that's the ultimate sacrifice. And that family should be applauded and appreciated and helped every way that they can. We have several couples in our church that have adopted parents, and they have a whole church behind them that's helping them in what they're doing.
And any advice for what a step-parent's role would be, like in a blended family or that kind of a thing?
A lot of that goes back to the parental consent in blended families. There are some families that physical spanking or any kind of like discipline has been already put limitations on. So a lot of that goes back to your own limitations. But I think
Legally, you can't
legally,
do certain things.
there's legal
Yeah.
things that you have to adhere to.
A step parent can't do that a natural parent could.
Right, and that has to be respected. But I think the step parent's role, if anything, is even a higher calling, because you've chosen, when you said to marry into that family as a step parent, you've accepted a new role, and personally, you have a higher calling, because you better not mess up, because this was really a big choice.
You are dad's wife, or you are dad's wife. You're not necessarily, the child's mom. And you just got to understand that
It's a whole different thing.
the child is not going to look at you the way the husband is going to look at you. And the husband's going to want you to come in. He may be looking for you to help the children, but the children may not be looking at you as mom. They might be looking at you. You got to just understand the dynamics here. You're the one that's put this together now, but you got to understand the dynamics, and you've got to be willing to come in and earn their respect. That's the key thing. Step parents don't just get it by signing on. They have to earn it, and they have to step into the situation, and they have to love, and they have to prove their place. And I think a wise step parent's going to do that. They're not going to come in and just try to be the child's mom just because they're now the dad's wife. They're going to try to earn that. They're going to do motherly things, but they're going to understand that they've got to earn that child's respect, and earn that place of mom in that child's life. It's not just given to them.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions, and I'm going to take them in a different order of what we have here. So I'd like to look at this question: how can we help our kids process grief after the loss of a close family member?
Well, I can answer that because I had a life experiences. I grew up in Plantation, Florida, over here in the 60s and the 70s, back when all this was just nothing out here. But my father passed away when I was a 10-year-old, and we were a believing family. And the most important thing that my mother instilled on us as we were 12, 10, and 8 at the time was the fact that God has a providential plan for all of our lives, and that He has a desired and appointed time for life and death, and that this was the path that He had appointed for us to walk into, that I would lose my father at the age 10, and that He would give me special equipping. She instilled in us such a peace to know that God is in control, And yet, she allowed us, of course, to grieve and to understand that it would be a loss. And it's kind of strange because one of the reasons we're going to go up to Fort Lauderdale from here, and I haven't visited my father's grave in 35 years. And for some reason, I think I want to go and see it. Just because it was a loss, but it was the beginning of a relationship with God that was unique and very different, because my God became my Abba Father as a 10-year-old. And I was afforded an opportunity to have a relationship with God that was much different than other people, which was exactly what I needed as a child of God. And I think in grieving with the loss of any family member, especially if it's grandparents, because we recently have had 3 of our 4 grandparents, his parents just passed, my stepfather passed in the last few years, and so our grandchildren are now having to deal with that loss. And I think just to invoke the confidence that we treasure what we have had, and their memory lasts forever and ever, and that God really blessed us with what we had, and it has so much value on today. Even, my father passed in 1970, and whoever's dealing with that loss, they're going to remember in 50 years that you always worry that the grandparents or whatever, their memory is going to be lost, and it won't be. The impact that grandparent had, or that aunt, that uncle, that sibling, will be with that child or that as an adult. And you can hold that in confidence. I'm living proof. My siblings are living proof. But it was because my mother instilled upon us the peace of God and his power and his providence. And I carry that with me, and I teach on that a lot, the providence of God. Because even though I didn't have a daddy to walk me down the aisle, I had a Heavenly Father that has walked by me every step of my life. And I know that was part of his plan. So whoever asked that question, it hit home, sorry.
This last question is, Pastor Sandy, when you recognized the calling on your son's life to ministry, what were some practical ways that you helped him navigate that? Anything that you'd advise to parents with a young man called to ministry to do or not to do?
Well, we didn't have any expectation in our family for the boys to be pastors. That was never, I never wanted to put that pressure on them. We obviously looked at being a pastor as a noble calling, but we didn't expect anything out of them. That was their own decision and they felt like God was calling them to do. I know I have one son who is a pastor. I have 2 sons that are not. The one son that is the pastor, I know in the beginning he struggled as he felt called by God to go into the ministry. His struggle was, am I doing this just because my dad is a pastor? Or am I doing this because I'm really called? And he kept struggling with the idea that he wanted to be a pastor only because his dad's a pastor, or only because he was in a pastor's family. And we had John Corson come to one of our conferences one year, and Zach begged me. He said, "Daddy, I want to take John to the airport. I want to take John to the airport." I said, "Zach, whatever you do, don't kill John or something. Whatever you do, get him to the airport.
I know all about speeding tickets.
Don't get a ticket. Don't do. Clean up your car before you put him in it." So I let him take him to the airport. And evidently, as the conversation went, Zach looks back on it now, and it was a turning point in his life. John told him, said, "Zach, you think that you want to be a pastor because you've grown up in a pastor's home. Have you ever thought that because God had called you to be a pastor, He put you in a pastor's home because that would be good training for you to be a pastor. And just a change in the way of thinking was all that my son needed to kind of lay that reservation to rest. He felt confident in God's call. He knew that the reason he had grown up God had called him to be a pastor before the foundation of the world. And what better way to be trained for it than to be raised in a pastor's home? And he settled that issue in his own heart, in his own life. So,
Well, I'd like to conclude with a word of prayer. Before we do, just want to mention any questions that you've asked. If they weren't answered, we're going to be addressing them in the Friends and Family podcast from God's Way Radio. And so, don't be disappointed. Just, download that episode as soon as it comes out. Schools were mentioned a lot. We do have Lighthouse ministry, Lighthouse Homeschoolers ministry here at the church. And I was thinking when Pastor Sandy was talking about how when Kathy had to drop off Zach in kinder, maybe if you drop him off at Lighthouse, you'll only cry for an hour and a half instead of 3 hours.
Is that a Christian school? Half-day Christian school.
So I'd encourage you, if you have more questions about that, you can speak with Pastor George back there. And also, if you haven't signed up for the men's retreat, it's coming around the corner. I'd encourage you to sign up for that as well. But why don't we, Pastor Sandy, would you mind closing us with a word of prayer?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Lord, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for the parents that have participated today. We thank you for their kids. Lord, thank you for the folks that have supervised the kids throughout the day. Lord, we praise you for them and thank you for their willingness to do it. And Lord, we pray for every family in the room. We pray that, Lord, that these parents, Lord, would be going home with a plan, with a purpose in mind. And Lord, I pray for their kids, Lord, that their kids would embrace that purpose and that plan. And Lord, that as they live life together, Lord, that the joy of the Lord would be our strength. Lord, that you would bless each family unit here today. Lord, we thank you so much for your word, and thank you for its truth. And Lord, I pray for the parents that are leaving with questions or still going home to facing some big problems. Lord, I pray that you would go before them and that you would give them the insights they need to work these things out. And Lord, that you would win the victory and that good things would happen as a result of their perspective. Lord, we just pray that you give us all faith. Help us to trust you. You love us and you have a plan and purpose for us. And we can depend on you. So we love you, Lord, and we trust in you. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.